Okay, here's an article from The Hollywood Reporter. Project Hail Mary author Andy Weir says Paramount rejected his Star Trek pitch. Their shows are SH, and I think we can guess the final letters there. Well, I definitely agree that Paramount's current Star Trek shows, the new Trek shows, they definitely are SH dot dot. But why should we agree with Andy Weir? Well, the reason that we should agree with Andy Weir is because, as we can see here in Variety, Project Hail Mary, the based on his book, flies high with 54.5 million. It's the most successful film of 2026 so far. So maybe we should listen to a man who can be involved in successful films to hear about why Star Trek has gone wrong. So let's go back to The Hollywood Reporter. The author of Project Hail Mary is firing a photon torpedo at Paramount Plus's Star Trek efforts. Best-selling writer Andy Weir criticised modern Trek shows while on the Critical Drinker podcast last week, even revealed he pitched a Trek show that was shot down by Paramount. That's really interesting. So the guy who wrote the most successful film of 2026 so far, it was based on his book, and also had The Martian. I think The Martian was about 2015, something like that. He was rejected from Star Trek. So this guy is a known successful property. He's a successful writer. And Alex Kurtzman, Paramount Plus, didn't want him involved in Star Trek. The topic began with the podcast's host, Will Jordan, saying how refreshing the box office hit Project Hail Mary had been, especially for audiences who grew up on Star Trek and now suffer from a lack of such sci-fi efforts today. Slightly aggressive quote marks from The Hollywood Reporter there. So I would agree that there's a lack of decent sci-fi efforts. There's a lot of science fiction out there. Very little of it is actually any good. Okay, Weir said, I forgot who it was. I wish I could remember who it was who said it. He said something like, all modern science fiction TV shows and movies have been heavily influenced by original Star Trek, except for the current batch of Star Trek shows. I would agree with that very strongly. So it's noticeable in modern Star Trek that the people making modern Star Trek understand nothing about what Star Trek is. Jordan replied yes, and they both laughed. Weir left that comment open to interpretation and then added, I'm Gen X, so my sci-fi was like original series Star Trek reruns and Lost in Space reruns. There wasn't really much in the way of new sci-fi that was airing until we got to Star Trek The Next Generation. So I'm also Generation X, and I would agree. So I would say until The Next Generation came on television in the UK, it was very much original Star Trek, some Battlestar Galactica as well, the old campy sort of Battlestar Galactica. And then The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine all come along. Later, Jordan brought up the divisive Star Trek Starfleet Academy, which Paramount Plus recently confirmed will end after its already shot second season. I think we can probably safely never talk about it again, Jordan quipped. Jordan says, so the critical drinker, said his advice to Paramount is to decanonize everything Star Trek from Enterprise onwards. And I like what Weir says next. It shows that he has his own opinions. So he talks a bit about Strange New Worlds. You're a little more severe than I am, Weir said. I'll give you my opinion, and I'm just a consumer. I like Strange New Worlds. I think it's pretty good. I don't really agree that Strange New Worlds is pretty good. For me, there's one episode that stood out. It was a time travel episode with Kirk and with Lieutenant Larn, Commander Larn, something like that. That was the only episode that actually made a positive impact on me. So I think Strange New Worlds has been just as limp as Discovery and everything else. I didn't hate Enterprise. I thought it was kind of weird. Lower Decks I thought was entertaining and fun. So Lower Decks, I've honestly only seen clips of it. And Yeah, it's got the references, it's got the member berries. It does look actually quite entertaining, but it doesn't seem like Star Trek. It seems like it's kind of it's tasing the corpse. It says, "Hey, do you remember this? Hey, do you remember this? Hey, do you remember this? Let's make a joke about this. Let's get this person on. Let's make another joke about this as well." So, Lower Decks for me, I mean, it's not offensive in the way that Discovery or Strange New Worlds is occasionally quite offensive, but it's not really Star Trek. It's Rick and Morty in a Star Trek skin suit. And then he goes on, I pitched a Star Trek show to Paramount, and I was in Zoom with the showrunners with all of the shows and spent a lot of time talking to Alex Kurtzman. I don't like a lot of the new Trek. He, as a person, is a really nice guy, but at the same time, these shows are SHIT. But they didn't accept my pitch, so, F them. Again, this guy is saying that these shows, they're basically no good. Why should we listen to him? Again, we should listen to him because he's been involved in the most successful movie of the year so far. So I would say that this guy knows what he's talking about. A professional, someone who makes his money off creating entertainment, is saying that modern Star Trek is bad entertainment. Maybe we should listen to him, perhaps. Maybe the people who currently make Star Trek should listen to him. Paramount Plus's Star Trek efforts are seemingly taking a break in space dock. For the first time in many years, there are no current Trek projects in production. Hurrah! Though there are 2 more years of Strange New Worlds left and another season of Starfleet Academy left to air. There is also speculation surrounding Alex Kurtzman's future with the franchise, which has led Paramount's Star Trek TV revival. His deal with CBS Studios goes through the end of 2026. Let's really, really hope that he gets kicked out. He might be an absolutely wonderful person, but he's an absolutely terrible fit for Star Trek. Paramount Plus is currently in talks with Kurtzman and his secret hideout production about renewing or extending his deal. Again, let's hope that the news is good in the sense that they get kicked out and Star Trek can just take a rest for a while. So the article carries on with Secret Hideout's response, essentially, with the response of some of the people. And I think the response of some of the people who've been working on these shows, and I think it's worth looking into a bit because it reveals a bit about their mentality. When news of Star Trek Starfleet Academy's cancellation broke, Kurtzman, alongside executive producers, released an open letter that addressed some of the criticism surrounding the show. Okay, so here we go. It's very word salad. Whether you're working on Star Trek or part of the marvel that is Star Trek fandom, it's very heart, soul, and conscience. The joy comes from adventuring across boundaries of time, space, and the humanly possible in service to Roddenberry's transformative vision of the future. That incomparable vision was fueled by an inexhaustible optimism. Star Trek places its bet on the best in human nature. It dares to imagine a society of infinite diversity and infinite combinations, free of war, hate, poverty, disease, and repression, dedicated to the spirit of scientific inquiry and respect for all life, whether carbon or silicon-based, green-skinned or blue. So personally, I find this kind of extremely generic. It's very high ideals. It's not got a lot to do with reality, although it does talk a little bit about the inspiration that Gene Roddenberry had. So I'll carry on with that. But make no mistake, Gene Roddenberry wasn't some starry-eyed dreamer. He was a decorated Army bomber pilot in the Pacific Theatre. He had seen firsthand the grim consequences of the worst of human nature. And his vision of the future wasn't just a promise of hope, it was also a warning. In a fraught, frightening time of intolerance and violence, Star Trek said, look, we made it, but just barely. First, we had to put all these ancient scourges behind us. It said that what makes us glorious as a species and gives us hope, etc., etc., etc. So Gene Roddenberry, a decorated Army bomber pilot. I might be wrong, but I think he was also a policeman working on the beat in Los Angeles as well. I'm very, very skeptical whether anyone who's worked on New Trek, served in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force, or has any experience of warfare or armed conflict. I imagine that they went to very nice schools, then they went to very nice colleges, and then they walked into writing jobs in places like Paramount, in places like Disney, and things like that. So the people who've been working on Star Trek for the last 10 years are completely different to the kind of people who actually created it in the first place. To give an example of what that difference is and the difference that Andy Weir has been talking about, I wanted to have a look at this article from Geeks and Gamers. William Shatner fires back. Star Trek was not political. I think the difference here is what the different generations think political means. So here we got William Shatner as Captain Kirk, then Gina Yashir from Starfleet Academy, who I've seen a video on recently, who was being extremely strident about what Star Trek is, despite admitting that she hadn't heard about it before she got cast in Starfleet Academy. So to give some background to the debate, though the newest show in the franchise, Starfleet Academy, has been cancelled, debate between its defenders and detractors about whether Star Trek should be inherently political and on which side of the aisle its philosophy aligns. I think this is a really important phrase, which side of the aisle its philosophy aligns. William Shatner, let's have a look at his tweet. Star Trek wasn't political. I'm not political. I can't even vote in the US. So to put a geocentric label on interstellar characters is silly. So he's talking about, Senator Ted Cruz said in response to a question, Captain Kirk would likely be a Republican. Captain Picard, Patrick Stewart's character of Star Trek: The Next Generation, would be a Democrat. So this was something that the senator was saying in response to a question he was asked. And Shatner is saying, putting a geocentric label on, talking about characters in the future being on a particular political side today is a really silly way to frame it. And I would agree. Going down to Fandom Pulse, I don't really know who Fandom Pulse is. Star Trek star William Shatner on politics. Star Trek wasn't political, I'm not political, etc. Is this how celebrities should act? What does Fandom Pulse mean here exactly? Is it saying that... Is it actually genuinely asking a question? Should celebrities stand above politics? Or is it, and my guess would be, that Fandom Pulse would like William Shatner to make a stand, and that actors should choose a political side. But I would argue that actors and writers and producers choosing a political side is why New Trek is so crap, is why it's so rubbish, is why Andy Weir has been successful with his movies, and why New Trek has been a financial and a ratings failure. But the conversation continues, and I think it develops to understand the difference between the generations. So this guy here, Eric Morozic, no idea who this is. So he's responding to what Shatner says, Star Trek wasn't political. This is an absurd thing for someone like William Shatner to say. The original Star Trek was incredibly political, even by the standards of the time. So I think we're getting a bit closer. What do they actually mean by political? And Shatner replies again, Star Trek was about society's social issues of the 1960s. Those issues over the years may have become political issues. So Shatner is saying that he sees it slightly differently. He sees it as social issues, not political issues. And if we continue, we get a bit further down and we get to Celestial Flea. And for me, Celestial Flea absolutely nails what the problem is. Older Trek still resonates so well even today. It treats viewers like adults who can judge the morals of the story by themselves. I 1000% absolutely agree with this. And then Celestial Flea, again, I 1000% agree. This is absolutely nails the problem. New Trek just lectures, panders, and attacks fans who give constructive criticism, labeling them as trolls, bigots, or whatever the buzzword of the. Yeah, so I would totally agree with this. The thing is that with old Trek, with the original series, with the next generation, and so on, the show was used to explore an issue. And with New Trek, the show is used to give a particular political opinion. And when you explore an issue, when you treat a viewer like an adult, people actually like that. People like being treated like an adult. When you lecture and pander and attack people, people don't like that. And therefore, people don't watch your show. And therefore, people say that your show is a load of sh dot dot. People say F your show. This is absolutely the difference between old and new Trek. So in old Trek, you had the Army veterans, the Air Force and the Navy veterans who saw the world as grey, who saw that there were right and wrong ideas on both sides. And New Trek, in my opinion, seems to be absolutely full of people who are certain that they're on the right side of history. They're certain that they're right and good. And when you're absolutely certain that you're right and good and that you don't need to think anymore about what you're doing, you just need to state your opinions, you can't make good entertainment when you do that. You can only make propaganda. And I would say New Trek is mostly just propaganda. So Celestial Flea, I think you've got it. Absolutely. Well done. That's perfect. And just to finish, another commenter says, yes, Star Trek raised social issues and used sci-fi to examine them in a different way, but it didn't lecture or advocate for a particular political viewpoint. So New Trek, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, it lectures, it advocates. You know how those people vote. And then this person gives an example. A Private Little War was about Vietnam, but it just showed how difficult an issue it was rather than picking a side. So the adult thing is to show how difficult an issue is. That's what Star Trek is. That's the essence of Star Trek. Picking a side, that's the essence of New Trek. That's why New Trek, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and so on, is absolute garbage. So, I would say that if you've got the most successful movie of the year, Project Hail Mary, and you're saying that an unsuccessful franchise is unsuccessful, and you know it's unsuccessful for particular reasons, we should be listening to Andy Weir. We should be giving him his own Star Trek show, perhaps. Thanks for watching.